Hello everyone, good morning. Today is going to be a bit of an off-topic video from Raids 3, but it's a question I get quite often in chat and when I'm streaming live, and I want to sort of address it because the way I answer this on stream is a little bit negative and I don't really like doing it as much, and I think I'd rather just make a little video on my thoughts and direct people here to give a bit of a broader overview about why I say the things I say, or in particular, in this case, about speedrunning. So the question here is, you often say that you don't like speedrunning, which is true. I say this quite a lot on stream. And then people often tell me, but you participate in speedruns. You've been known to do chambers back in the day. You are a prolific Inferno speedrunner, and more recently, you've been posting stuff about doing TOA speedruns. So how can you have it both ways? Why are you double standarding this? You can't both say that you don't like it and then participate in it, which is entirely fair. And to explain this, put simply, when people talk about speedrunning in old school, and especially when it's brought up as a Twitch chat question to me, in most cases it's brought up in the sense of you're trying to compete for records and go as fast as you can, and this is something that really matters. And this is not quite how I see speedrunning these days based on my experience and everything that goes into it. So the part that I dislike about speedrunning is the actual competing for records. That's why I say the things I do about how I don't like it so much. It's because I actively dislike participating in that part of speedrunning. And unfortunately, that is also the most important or largest part of speeding, which is why, again, that's my general response. But there are some really great benefits to speedrunning, which I don't, again, talk about too much. And this is what I'm going to talk about in this video. So it's mostly just going to be a ramble. I'm not going to throw clips down or anything, really. You'll just see some whatever gameplay I happen to choose at the time. But in short, speedrunning can be incredibly rewarding for a variety of reasons. Some obvious ones are, put simply, pushing the known limits, not just of yourself, but also improving. So, like, improving yourself as a player for sure, but also improving the gameplay and in discovering metas and trying new things and just getting a broader overview of the game and the content and really getting a bit more in tune with it. That's a huge positive of speedrunning, and the best part about it is you don't have to be at the top level. You can be a big noob at the game, you can be a big noob at the content you're trying to do, and you can still get these massive benefits out of speedrunning. And that's a huge part that I personally enjoy, which is an explanation as to why currently I have been doing TOA speedruns early on. It's not so much that I care about the records, and if people are interested enough to ask me why I've been posting stuff like record runs on Twitter, it's because I like Twitter clout. I'm trying to get new followers and engage with people and widen my audience. That's the reason. It's not because I personally think they're impressive. But more so, again, during these speedruns in TOA that we've been doing recently, especially on days 1 through 5, we were able to really push the meta in teams and see what our limits were, both as players and for the content, to identify items that were relevant, interesting, time saves for rooms. And what we're doing here is we're taking it to the highest level we possibly can, and then we're bringing it down a notch. And we're bringing it down a notch to a place where we're comfortable doing the raid, but also after we've learned these methods through speedrunning it and trying to go fast, the gameplay we're actually able to deliver at this point in time is miles ahead of what it would be if we didn't do that process. And this is all like the good stuff of speedrunning coming together, and that's where some of the metas now are revolving around, especially in Expert Plus, which is where I've been doing my speeds. So to go back to a bit about more why I don't like speedrunning in the truest sense, that is competing for records, it's ultimately RuneScape is an RNG-based game. It's very RNG-based. If you aren't aware of it, most other games will do some sort of like standardized roll for your max hit, plus or minus a small fraction of it. In RuneScape, we have a system where if you pass your accuracy roll and you don't hit a 0, you will hit 0 to your max hit entirely randomly, in most cases. Not all, but in most. So for example, if my T-bow maxes an 88 in the new range armor in the Inferno on task, and I pass my accuracy roll, I can hit a 0 to an 88, averaging a 44 passing accuracy. And of course, we get into a different concept of variance, and you might hear this term brought up quite a few times. The idea of variance is pretty simple. If I'm doing one T-bow hit, I have a very high variance in what my hit can be. It can hit 0 to 88, and therefore, if the speedrun consisted of one T-bow shot, you would reset the run until you hit an 88. Now, if we're talking about something like TOA or Inferno or other speedruns in the game, you're doing multiple hits with multiple weapons. And some weapons are more RNG than others, and other places in the game or other places in the run can be more RNG than other places. And all this means is that certain places have more variance to them than others. The speedruns with the highest variance in the game, therefore, in my opinion, are the least interesting. And the speedruns with the least variance, i.e. the ones that if you play the best, you get the best result, are the most interesting. And it's just a case in the game where it's not very much a place where it will ever truly be a case of play well, get rewarded at the high level. It will unfortunately be a case of make sure you're playing to a good standard, but ultimately RNG takes over, and that's the end of it. So when we're talking about things like Inferno, which is one of my, again, really big enjoyments in the game, I really enjoy trying to push the meta for things and seeing what's available. A good example of this is when I was trying to create and work around thrall setups for the Inferno, where we didn't really think thralls were viable due to the amount of due to the lack of healing for not being on the ancient spellbook. And my interest at this point in time was to see if thralling was viable, because thralling is like a 30 to 40 second time save if done correctly. And no one to this point was really even remotely interested in trying to make it work, because it was too much work, it was too much effort, and having to create better starts in the waves and better sort of just everything as far as like consistency and strategies and things. It was just really awful to make it work. But that's kind of things that I personally enjoy, and I like pushing the meta when it comes to things like that I enjoy. But what I don't enjoy right now with Inferno is everything, well, maybe not right now, because we're after TOA release and we've got new gear to play with. But in the Thrall meta, and just before the Thrall meta became a thing, we were at a place where pretty much everyone, the top, let's say, 5 to 10 players who could do Inferno speeds to a very good degree, all 10 of us were competitively able to get record or push a really sick time. And yet, while some players are slightly better advantage-wise, or consistency and skill-wise and everything, not necessarily the best player would ever hold the record at given points. It's why the Inferno record has been trading hands over the last few years between 4 or 5 different people. It's a combination of who wants to put the most time in, who does the most runs, yes, consistency and still like skill, but ultimately the deciding factor, RNG. And if you talk to the players at the top of their game in the Inferno, they will all agree that RNG plays a massive factor, if not the defining factor. And that's what's both very interesting but sort of unfortunate about it. So hopefully this is a bit more of a broad overview on things. There is actually one more thing I'd like to discuss, just like an interesting point that I find, well, interesting. And that is the idea of when does something become meta? When does something actually go from the stage of I'm testing it and we think it's theoretically good to this is now the meta? And that's a really interesting question that I think is relevant to this discussion, and I have a good example to follow up with. So I believe it's Vastus. Please correct me if I'm wrong. I'm going to put his links in the description because he's got some really cool YouTube videos up right now. And I believe it may not be him who came up with it, but it might be. But please, again, correct me if I don't know. I believe Vastus, I'm going to have to double check the name. I'll link all his things in the description again. But I believe this fella, who's running top 5s previously before TOA came out, came up with a meta for finishing Setetseg maze much faster than what was known possibly, by using a stall and humidify at the same time, and a red X click to make it work. Basically, you would be able to survive the maze damage as a 5-man, skipping the entire maze using a clever use of mechanics. And there's been some challenges both ways on this. My take on it is that nothing is proven to be meta until you are able to prove that it is like competitively and consistently useful. And this goes along the lines of, it may in theory be good, but practically if you can't make it work, it's not going to happen. So you have to have a think about that. This is like very much pushed away from the actual main bulk of the conversation about like speedrunning and what I like about it and what I don't like. But I think it's just such an interesting point to talk about, and I want to lead into the idea of what makes things practical and what makes things theoretical, and what's the difference between that for different speed types. So just to clarify what I'm doing here. But this in particular is just super interesting because I personally don't classify anything as meta until a record has been set with it, unless it is like such a huge time save. If you know what I'm talking about in this regard, something, for example, like Akka Butterfly, which is a TOA method for kiting Akka with melee, so that he stays mageable the entire fight until the very end. I would classify that as a speedrun meta to begin with, even if it's not proven to get record, and by the way, people have got records with it. But that's a method that clearly you can tell is just too strong because there are so many factors that go into it that reduce time loss. But other than that, things like the Vastus Humidify stall and whatnot, personally, I don't think that it would be called meta, as it were, until that point in time that it is proven to be good, because it's like on the limit. In theory, it's very good. Practically, perhaps not. But tying this all the way back in again, we don't know if his team just got unlucky on RNG, because Tob is like run a lot as far as fives go. It's competitive. So we don't know if it's a case that it's actually a good method that saves 5-10 seconds, but those 5-10 seconds are being outweighed by another team's superior RNG at some point. So this whole discussion is actually really super interesting when you break it down like this. But I figured, I don't know. I'm taking a bit of a day off from streaming. I'm going to get back to it tomorrow. Thought I'd throw in a bit of a discussion here and have another little ramble. It's a very common question at the end of the day, so I think what I'll do now is just forward people to this video whenever I have like a discussion that pops up in chat on it, just to give some like broader perspective and not be so like negative about it in chat. That's about it really though. Yeah, that's it. See you guys in the next video. Bye bye.